The topic? Financial planning for doctors in 5 easy steps. Now, you're probably thinking, how can you give me full financial plan in 5 easy steps? And you are correct. This will not be a full financial plan in any capacity, nor should you ever take a YouTube video or a blog as a total financial plan. But we are going to give you 5 easy steps that you should be following, at least paying attention to. I'd say for the most part, this is probably geared towards more younger physicians, maybe in training, early attending years. But who knows, depending on when you got your start there, or maybe you did some other things and kind of lost track of this. Maybe you're more mid-career or more of an established attending. These steps are going to pertain to you. And we cover a few things, right? We go over the emergency fund. We go over debt, more or less, kind of looking at youth student loans, employer benefits, budgets, which I know, not a favorite word. No one likes budgets, but we're going to make it a little bit more exciting, a little bit more fun, a little bit easier to follow. And then last but not least, we'll hit savings percentages. So those are the main steps, the main topics we're going to walk through in this blog post. Again, it will not give you a full financial plan, but it should give you some solid takeaways, some good key points that you should confirm in either your own current plan or what you want to add in your upcoming, updates, or maybe you're building a plan from scratch. So as always, stay tuned. That's coming up next. All right, first up, the emergency fund. We literally put this at the top of every financial plan. I don't care if you call it emergency fund. I don't care if you call it the rainy day fund. I don't care if you say, hey, I just have some cash saved up. But it is vital to have an emergency fund. Some clients are okay with a smaller number. For most of our, call it attending physicians, we usually put the line in the sand at 20,000 as the bare minimum. Some clients like 40, some like 50. We have some clients that like a multiple of that in hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, we obviously want to make sure it's not going to hurt their financial plan in the long run just because of losing purchasing power. But that number can vary. There's not a perfect number here. We're going to give you some guidelines. So in our blog post, here are the actual data that we reference. And I think it's a good starting point. It might not be perfect. And then the other takeaways for us, WealthKeel, we break our emergency funds down into two different levels or two different buckets even. Level 1, your true cash reserve. So what's your emergency fund number? This is usually where we like that 20,000, maybe it's 40, maybe it's 50. This is where in our discovery call, which we call the soft side of money, we ask, what's your sleep number, right? What number do you need to see in there that you feel good? But in addition to that, we also have a level 2 where we start to then build on to a taxable investment account, a lower risk taxable account, where it's still accessible. You can still get to that money. But for the most part, hopefully we don't, but it's there for emergencies, but we're going to start to get some market exposure. So really, we're a little bit more aggressive on our emergency fund number, but because of that, we also then sprinkle a little bit more into the actual stock market per se, which we call our level 2 emergency fund or our level 2 bucket. So here's kind of the guidelines we give you. And this is where we're more aggressive. We use more of an income number as opposed to an expense number. And I usually say that's because we work with Gen X, Gen Y physicians. Life still has a lot of course corrections, a lot of big events, starting a family, buying a home, moving across the country, changing one practice to the other, having a second child, buying a new car, maybe upgrading a house. There's just a lot more moving parts for our clients. So that's why we do like to be a little bit more aggressive on our cash number, but also we do build in a level 2, which gives you a little bit more market exposure and more of a moderate allocation. So if you're single or married with dual reliable income, we can scoot this number to more of 3 months of gross income. So if your gross income is, 20,000 per month, could be 60,000. Married with one income or single with kids, bump that up to about 4 to 5 months of gross income. Married with kids, single with variable income. So think of it as maybe a practice owner, maybe RVU, where your income could shift a little bit. We usually use a little bit higher number here. This is where we're getting close to 6 months. Some clients will want more, right? Especially practice owners, I'd even say even more for our dentist clients. Not uncommon for them to want to have a larger cash reserve. I also link in COVID here. Our dentists were hit much harder than our physician clients were for the most part because they truly could not see anyone for a few months. So their numbers actually crept up about over the past year on what they felt comfortable with. Now we did have some physicians also that were more heavy based on RVUs where their pay took a significant hit. So we've actually seen emergency funds tick up a little bit. So main goal here, Understand that you can have this in a few different buckets. For the most part, you should have at least 20,000. It might be more than that. And depending on how much more it is in that, then start to think of that level 2 emergency fund as well. And most importantly, from just that true savings account, look at some of the online banks. Please look at some of the online banks, because you're probably getting paid about 0.01 at any brick and mortar bank. I don't care what bank, big brand bank name you want to plug in here, local banks too, even credit unions. They're all going to be extremely low. If there's a brick and mortar location and they have staff, I'm going to tell you now the rate's probably pretty low. Or a Marcus, an Ally, a Capital One, American Express, their savings accounts are probably a multiple of that. So just be aware of that. If you're going to keep money on the sidelines, at least get paid a fair rate. And I know it's probably not keeping pace with inflation, but it's probably doing a lot better, like a multiple better than what your brick and mortar bank is. So step 1 is just understand your emergency fund, have an emergency fund, have a conversation with either yourself or your significant other or your spouse on what's our sleep number? What do we want to have there? And then after you have that, and usually we even say within three years of goals as well. So level 1 is plug in that number, 20, 40, 50, whatever your number would be, plus 3 years of goal. So think here, house down payment. We're okay removing market volatility in there. Outside of that number, when you get into that 6 months of gross income, outside of that level 1, that's where you can maybe look to that level 2 and then start to introduce some market exposure here. But again, at least at a moderate. To us, moderate's like a 50-50 mix or a 40-60, referring to 50% stocks, 50% bonds, or 40% stocks, 60% bonds. And we won't get into stock allocation details here, but on that taxable account, also a good spot to possibly sprinkle in some municipal bonds here, because again, this is a taxable account. Also take advantage of exchange traded funds known as ETFs or properly built mutual funds. Kind of put in a plug here for a Vanguard fund where they're built more efficiently from a tax perspective. So again, step 1, emergency funds. Step 2, eliminating debt. For the most part, we are looking at used student loans. So we put some examples in the blog post. Good debt, mortgage, student loans, small business loans, right? If you took out a business loan to buy into your practice or your surgical center, for all intents and purposes, that's good debt in my opinion. Bad debt is credit cards, payday loans, which fortunately we don't see many of those with our clients. We don't see a ton of those in today's world, but I know they are out there, so I don't want to forget about them. Or a car loan. So let's start with student loans. Depending on where you are in your path, let's just say you're out of medical school. So anywhere in your training years, from intern year to your 3rd year of fellowship, depending on your specialty, whatever the example would be, you should know what path you're on for student loans. You're either going for aggressive payoff or you're going for public service loan forgiveness. Hopefully you're not trapped in limbo in this middle ground. That's where it can get a little bit more difficult. But understand what path you're on to get your student loans paid off and or forgiven. If you have credit card debt, start to chip away at it. Even if you're in training, I know there's not an abundance of cash flow now, but start to chip away at it. And you're in 10 years, that's likely should be a high top priority. And I know credit card debts are not ideal, but let's be honest, when physicians are going through training, does it happen? Certainly it does. Could there be some bad personal loans that even happen there just to kind of get you through there? We see it. It's not uncommon, it's not common, but we see it. So don't be ashamed of it, right? Just have a plan in place to get it paid off. Small business loans, right? This is more or less we kind of look at your whole plan and decide how do we pay it off, at what time frame, what's the rate, what's the market been doing, things of that nature. But also Finance 101 versus Personal Finance. Finance 101 could say this, but Personal Finance says that you're more comfortable getting rid of the debt because you just don't like debt, or you'd rather more aggressively because you're okay with the business loan, whatever the example would be, understanding that. So main thing here is eliminating debt. And part 1, I would say, is understand how you're going to get your loans out of your way, assuming that you have student loans. If you don't, high five. That's great to have those out of your way. After that, I'd say bad debt to me is going to be personal loans or credit card debt that may be built up through your training or even when you're in medical school. And car loans. Car loans are one of those topics that always come up. I usually describe it like this. 1, I always say the international car of most young physicians is the Honda Accord, maybe the Honda Civic, whatever. It's probably a Honda, right? For whatever reason, Honda is just that car. So having no car payment or a low car payment is ideal here. But if you go to buy a brand new car, you just became an attending, and you want to buy that Tesla or plug in any other expensive car, If you have to stretch the payments out over 7 years to feel good about the payment, it's probably too much car for this phase in life. Not to say you can't get it later. You're going to have plenty of opportunities to add in the fancy cars. I promise you that. I promise you. But just know where you are today. Build your foundation strong. You're going to have plenty of opportunities to add in the fun stuff later. But just, anything less than 7 years, anything less than 7 years let's describe it this way. Anything between 3 to 7 years, likely, possibly too much car. Closer to 7, probably too much car. Less than 3 years, ideal. If you lease, lease is kind of one of those things where leasing versus buying is not an intense financial decision. If you can buy a car and drive it for 10 years, you're likely going to do better buying a car. But if you like the newer car every few years, if you like the safer car, I lease cars, so no judgment here. If you like the newer car, you like the safer model that just came out, leasing can still make a lot of sense too. Also depend on your business structure, but that's for another conversation. But step 2, understanding your debt and then eliminating your debt. Step 3, understand your employer benefits. Simple, but extremely powerful. And this can take many levels, so it's going to be hard to get into too much detail here, but understand your retirement options, right? Do they have a 401k in place? Do they have a 403b in place? Do they also offer a 457b? Is that 457b private or public? Public's kind of like a bonus 403b, not kind of, it pretty much is a bonus 403b. Is it private? Understand the rules, right? Really, more or less, from separation of service, what are the rules to pull the money out? Do they force you to pull it all out in year 1? All right, if so, be aware of that, right? How is the balance sheet for the hospital? If the hospital might go under and it's a private 457b, could be some issues there. So just understand that that's not your money. That's the hospital's money. Until the money is actually in your bank account, it's not yours, or in another retirement account because of separation of service, and let's just say you move it to an IRA or whatever the example would be. But just understand that. But outside of just that, understand your life insurance. Understand your disability. Do they have a high deductible health plan that allows you to get an HSA? Do they have commuter benefits? Do they offer FSAs, whether it's for healthcare or dependent care? There is a lot of benefits that are embedded in there that you should understand. Especially in academic medicine. I always make this as one of my biggest arguments, where I understand on paper your pay may be lower, but when you build in a lot of your benefits, you might actually have quite the setup going, but you just need to take advantage of all those and understand how they work. So step 3 is just understanding your employer benefits and then maximizing those employer benefits. Step 4, budgets. Sure, budgets are boring, but they are vital to your success. We like to think of it this way. Instead of building this hard budget that you have to follow to the penny, do top-down budgeting. Tell your money where to go at the top of your budget, and then you don't have to micromanage the discretionary spending. And usually this varies for every household. I have never seen one budget that is, oh wow, this matches, the Joneses actually match up exactly to the Smith family. Never happens that way, right? Maybe some percentages, but not from an actual line item. So usually it could look like this. 50% goes to your living expenses. 30% goes to your lifestyle choices. That's more or less discretionary spending. 20% to debt payment savings. This can all vary, but that ratio breakdown has been pretty popular, the 50, 30, 20. I think it makes sense at a high level. I think everyone, again, is unique here. But for the most part, work it backwards. Tell your money where to go at the top of the budget, right? You got your necessities, right? You got to pay for your housing. You got to pay your utilities. You got to get some food. You're maxing out your employer plan. You're doing your backdoor Roth IRA. You're making your debt payment. Okay, after that, let's just say you have 30% left over. Now is where you can say, all right, I'm going to save some extra for travel down the road. I'm going to do some fun spending now. I'm going to go out with my friends. I'm going to buy X, for this month. Whatever the example would be, your discretionary spending. Usually I joke and call it my Starbucks indicator or my Chick-fil-A indicator, where you don't have to micromanage those. I know Susie Orman would not approve of that, but contrary to popular belief, you can still go to Starbucks and actually retire someday. So you're going to be okay. Just understand what's your highest value, right? Maybe you do enjoy Starbucks. Maybe that gives you that great feeling every Wednesday morning throughout summer and you get that iced chai latte. If that gives you excitement, that's important for you. It probably just took a little bit of your budget somewhere else that wasn't as important to you. That's okay. Build a budget that makes sense for you, but you do need to have some plan in place. You don't have to micromanage it. We have some clients that love this. They'll do it weekly, monthly. They'll send us over their spreadsheets and they're into it. We have other clients that say, I don't even want to hear the word budget in our time together. I plan to work with you for decades. If you say the word budget one time, you're out. They just don't like it. So that's where we try to work it backwards and say, hey, here's the goals, work it backwards from there. So main takeaway here is have a plan in place, at least go through this once, maybe refresh it every few months, maybe look at it once per year, but you need to have some type of system in place. Some very popular tools to always look at are YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget, or even Tiller. I am a big Tiller fan. Tiller is more of your conventional budgeting, think more or less your Excel spreadsheet, Google Doc, Google Sheets, I guess it's called. YNAB, just for my brain, it doesn't work. YNAB is more or less building up cash to prepay future expenses. Some love that, some don't. I personally don't, but some of our clients love it. That's their system. But good tools to make budgeting a little bit more exciting, dare I say exciting in budgeting, but also a little bit easier to track as you link your bank accounts, credit cards, things of that nature. So step 4, I know budgeting is not fun, but it does need to be a part of your plan at least every now and then to keep a little bit of an update, a refresh going. Step 5, save. We listed as save 15 to 20% of your income, which I think is a fair number. Now, we also put a little chart in there from JP Morgan Asset Management called Physician Savings Percentage, which will have a few different moving parts to it. It may catch you by surprise, too. The numbers will be a little bit higher in that chart, but I'd rather actually err on the high side. If you read that and you're like, hey, I can easily swing 26%. But usually I say 15 to 20 is probably a good start. Likely does need to increase over time. Or if you got started really early, 15 to 20 could actually be a pretty smooth sailing. But for the most part here, you're trying to max out your 401k, 403b. If you're in training, at least get up to the match. I know not every program offers a match. Some do, some don't. But at least get the match. After that, what else can you get into your backdoor Roth IRA? Or at this point, say, assuming you're in training, regular Roth IRA because your income's not high enough. As an attending, it certainly is going to be a backdoor Roth IRA. I should say for the most part, right? Depending on some specialties, married, not married, that might not be the case, but understand the income limits. Most physicians have to do a backdoor Roth IRA as an attending. After that, circle back to that 401k, 403b, make sure you're maxing that out. After that, do you have a 457b? Do you have an after-tax 401k? Can you max out an HSA? If not, you're maybe looking into the taxable account here. But just 1, know your savings options. 2, understand what percent you're currently saving. And 3, see where you can also optimize here, right? How can you actually put those two together and then optimize that? We also put a neat little spreadsheet in there. We actually put this in the last section, which was our budget worksheet. And then for this one here, we'll put that the chart from the spreadsheet from JP Morgan. That'll all be in the blog post. So again, I realize you watching the YouTube video right now, you're wondering what is he referring to, but on the actual notes below, you can click on the blog post and the blog post will give you those resources. We'll also put a link in there to our retirement savings blog post, which actually has another Excel spreadsheet, a free tool, no email addresses, no funny business here. You can take that as well and then work it backwards from a spending perspective on what your nest egg would be, and then for your nest egg, kind of going through what your savings numbers would be. So we'll also include that in the blog post, which should give you even better resources as you start to walk through these 5 steps. So those are the 5 steps to work on that financial plan. Again, it's not perfect. It doesn't encompass everything, but you should get a good takeaway from each section here, whether it's just confirming something you're already doing, or maybe it's adding something new. As always, thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel, click the little bell icon. We'll give you a heads up every time we send out a new video. As always, too, give this video a like. That also helps us get out there to more physicians to help more individuals. But most importantly, thank you for tuning in as always, and I will catch you on the next video.